Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to bring you guys along. We're doing a quick part of a repair here on the rally cars, what we've got working on today. Of course, it's getting to be winter time, so we're kind of wrapping things up, so starting to go through the car a little bit more. We're going to address one thing today. You can see there's a number of things going on here, but we're going to take a look at one thing in particular, which is our wheel bearing on this side of the car. So a little background on this thing. I got this car from a wholesale line a number of years ago. And the engine was blown and there was some other things that was wrong with it. When I got it running the first time, I found on the very first test drive that both front wheel bearings were just destroyed, had loads of play in them right away. So normal Japanese car thing, really, for those of you who are working on any of these vehicles, whether it's Nissan or Subaru, Toyota, Honda, wheel bearings go out just like anything, especially on these Japanese cars. Right away, I put new wheel bearings in this thing, and since then, I feel like I've been fighting a knuckle issue, like there was actually something wrong with the knuckle because the wheel bearings on this corner wouldn't get quite tight enough ever. It was enough to run it for a little bit of a time, but a lot of wheel bearings have gone in this corner. So this is a culmination of a few things we've got going on here, which is an existing wheel bearing issue, and then an issue that Ben and I discovered at Rally, Idaho this last summer. I've got the car already pulled apart. We're going to look at just pressing this in and out, and we're going to talk about a few things. I'm obviously not going through the whole repair start to finish, but we'll look at using the press and getting a new bearing in this thing. So one of the things that we've got going on here, when we had an issue at Rally, Idaho, and this is something that I talk with my automotive students about. Of course, that's what I do here. We're in Casper College Automotive Shop again, in their nice space. But one thing we talk about in brake class is how rotor warpage or rotor runout can cause a soft pedal. And I know some of my students have trouble grasping kind of the idea behind that. But when you have a rotor, here's our brake rotor off of this corner. When you have a rotor spinning and you start to get that run out, whether it's warpage or run out from the rotor, or a buildup of tolerances on the car, it doesn't really matter where it comes from. When you start to get that back and forth wobble of the rotor, that's constantly pressing your caliper piston back in, which means every time you touch the brake, you have to take up that space that it now just clearanced in there. And it makes the pedal feel softer. So that's what happens. That's what we experienced at Rally, Idaho to a really extreme degree. Partway through just stage number 3, I believe, my pedal started to drop, started to get really soft, and would go to the floor by the time we hit the end of stage 3. And then on the way back, I noticed that it was very inconsistent, that depending on how I was turning the vehicle, I would actually build brake pressure again. So we fought with it a little while, and unfortunately, run out hadn't even crossed my mind yet. Ben and I went through, we figured out a bunch of stuff. We were bleeding things and tightening things and doing all kinds of stuff. And then we came in a couple stages later for one of our brakes, and it felt like something was loose in the front end. And so I put Ben on task to go figure that out. And sure enough, we had a wheel bearing failure, and that was causing all of our brake problems. Here's the knuckle I've already got pulled off. Anybody who's been in here doing this job before, you see the snap ring hanging there loosely. That is not how that is supposed to be. This snap ring was installed the last time I did the bearing, and now it is not. So it just got loose enough to where, and I know we don't have to get very close to see how much play I have in that wheel bearing. That's not what you want. Those components should be tight together, only able to spin in that direction. So this is what we were dealing with. Loosened up, gave us our braking issues. We got it kind of back together. We finished the rally, actually did really well, but it was an issue, definitely slowed us down. I've got a whole new unit. Like I said, I suspect that I've been having problems with this knuckle since the beginning. I've got a replacement back there, a used one. We're gonna put our new hub and bearing assembly into that and see if that helps us out here this next season. So there we go, off to the press. Okay, here we go. We're gonna first start by pressing the hub out of our used knuckle here. Found an adapter just small enough to fit within the bearing so we don't press that in its place. We can press on the back side of that hub. All right. There we go. That thing must have been in there for a while. Didn't want to move right away. All right, so there's our hub assembly. And this looks like any of you, again, worked on Japanese vehicles before, you'll recognize this bearing setup as being a factory early original roller bearing, or ball bearing. A lot of manufacturers went up to and changed to a roller tapered type wheel bearing. So as far as replacements go, they could go either way. Our new replacement might be ball bearing, it might be roller bearing. We're going to find out here in just a minute. So get that out of our way. Pull our hub up. So there's our hub. Studs are missing. We're not going to worry about that. I've got a whole new hub that's going to go on here. Inner race from the bearing, that is on here. If we were reusing this hub, we would need to go back in with our splitter, get underneath this outer race, this race, and we would press that off of the spindle. In comparison, here's our new one. Studs are in it. No race on it, which is how you want to start out. Again, we've got brand new, so we don't need to worry about doing that. Saves us a pressing step, which is nice. Okay, so we got, there's a snap ring inside here. That same snap ring I showed you on the old unit that was starting to fall off. Right in there, that actually secures the bearing itself into the housing here into the center and maintains that bearing in there. All right, I pulled that off camera. This unit here is a little bit old and is a little bit rusty, and it took me a few minutes to get that done, but we got it. But now that means we're going to see kind of how this goes. The bearing is going to be equally as rusty and stuck, I imagine. So, but I'm all set up. I got my adapters pushing on the inner race now from the back side here, and we're going to put some pressure on that and see what happens. Woo. It's scary, but that's always a good sound to hear when you're pressing. That means things are coming apart. All right, we're slowly moving. We're going to stop for a second. I'm going to double check that my base here is big enough to accept the wheel bearing. I'm not sure that it is. All right. I know you guys didn't see it before, that this bearing has now come out and is no longer sitting within the housing itself. It's actually been pushed up just a little bit. We want that to fit. We want that to fit nicely, okay, within our base, and it looks like we've got just enough room to make that happen. So I think we're gonna keep going. Pushing on the inner race again. I don't know how well you can see it, but it is just barely moving. All right, there are our pieces. That was just big enough. And there's our wheel bearing assembly. Okay? So we just pressed out of the unit here. All right, we're gonna get this inside cleaned up real quick, and then we'll be back to the press. We'll put the new bearing in, the new snap ring. We'll follow that up with the hub, and we're gonna be ready to go, I think. All right, guys, we're gonna look at just cleaning the inside of this up a little bit. I'm not too worried about the outside right now. I may do something about treating that later on, but right now we're going to get this thing back together. We do need to clean the outside, take off any rust buildup, any burrs. Hopefully a lot of that came off when the bearing itself came out, but we do need to get in here and clean it up. Now, a couple areas in particular is going to be the snap ring groove right here, and then also there's a shoulder in the back. All right, we also need to clean up the inside of that at least. Now, usually what I use is I get a little red Scotch-Brite pad and I'll just kind of go around it a little bit, get into the groove, maybe get some brake cleaner. This is a little bit more corroded So I'm going to get in there with a power tool, something pneumatic, here at the shop. Now, for those of you who are wondering, this disc, this is not a wire wheel. These are actually nylon fingers. Okay, so they do less damage. They still work on corrosion and stuff just fine, but it's not quite as aggressive. I don't want to remove a bunch of material. I just want to clean all that corrosion up. So that's what we're using, a nylon finger disc. All right. It actually looks pretty good. I think our snap ring is going to work just fine in there. So now we get to work on putting it back together, which now that it's apart, shouldn't be so bad. Okay, back on the press again. I got that same base that I used to press the bearing out, just to give us a support nice and flat up off the base. Obviously this is a complicated unit. It's got a lot of stuff going on. Here's the bearing we're using. Got it from Napa. It's SKF. And I just always like to see what branding is on here. Those of you who've watched our other video comparing timing belts, I'm always curious where my bearings, where my components come from. This one in particular is branded SKF and says it is Korean. So. All right, I can't remember if we had any Korean parts in the timing belt kits. Okay, this bearing, we're going to start it in the front, goes through where the snap ring area is, passes through to that back shoulder that I cleaned up. It will stop once we hit that point, and then we can apply the snap ring to the top to hold that bearing into place. All right. Here we go, and again I'm pressing on that inner bearing. Pressing on the outer race would be ideal. I've done loads of wheel bearings. Pressing on the inner bearing to get it back on works well, it works just fine. So. Looks like we may have started it just a little bit crooked. We're going to see if we can sort that out right now. And there we go. Nice and smooth. Now it should travel in pretty fast. I am going to release this a little bit and center us back up so I don't have any interference issues. All right, and when you're pressing something in, you'll notice a pretty significant stop in movement. All right, so again, we're down below the face of the surface. We can just now see that snap ring groove in there. We'll go ahead and move to the bench. We'll apply that snap ring, make sure it fits in there snugly. This thing does already have a factory seal on the bearing, so we do not actually have to install a separate seal, which is nice. So we'll move to the bench, we'll install that snap ring, we'll get to the hub, and be good to go, I think. All right, here we go. I've got a brand new snap ring. A lot of times I reuse these. This one is in really rough shape. I did kind of anticipate that, so I went ahead and bought a new one. At the same time, I got a new bearing. A few different styles. Most newer snap rings for this style have this gap, this opening here, and for the most part, a normal set of needle nose pliers will do the trick. All right. Looks pretty good. Back to the press one more time. All right, we've got our same base plate once again. That gives us just enough room to get our new hub pressed into the bearing. This will have to go through both pieces. And then I've got a little adapter for the press to hit, and I think this will work good. I'll take a little bit more time squaring this up as it gets started, just to make everything a little bit easier. And it's sitting pretty nicely now, so we'll go ahead and all right. Now we're going to come back up, and then we're going to try and put some support on the inner race on the back side of the bearing. That way we know that we're getting this hub unit all the way through both inner races of the bearing, not leaving anything loose. Went through the front base just fine. As you can see, we still need to come into this rear inner piece. All right, not quite as smoothly as I had hoped. Let's see how we ended up here. The back of the bearing looks pretty good. There's the inside of the hub with the splines for the CV axle. So I'm moving it, and I think it feels pretty darn good. So we might just set this up one more time. Make sure we are as seated as we can be. All right, okay, we're all set up here. Let's see if we can finish this off. We did get a little extra movement out of it. I'm glad we checked that. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for our new wheel bearing. I got it here. It's nice and smooth. It's nice and tight. We're already better off than the last time I put a wheel bearing in that last knuckle. Who knows what happened to that thing, I guess, but this is looking pretty good. So thanks for checking it out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, tell us about stuff if you've done this before, especially if you've had a race car using OEM wheel bearings, components, anything really. I always like to hear about that stuff, so please let us know. Thanks to Casper College, the auto shop here, for letting us use their facility. Do you want to learn about automotive? You can check out caspercollege.edu/automotive technology. Also, you want to follow us in the race team Function Autosport, you can find us on Facebook. And I think that's it. Thanks again. We'll see you guys next time.